It's Monday. It's June 20th, 2022. I'm watching CBS this morning. They have on this, the label, the symbols read U.S and then Air Force. And they claim the sounds that the humans or the people on the show claim in this state-run propaganda is that he's a general in the Air Force. I would have no way of really knowing. He's dressed the part, and he has these clips on his collar that say U.S, and they say that he's the first black man. Now, the first. Now, I'm starting the visual reference at the end of the segment where he hands them a coin, or like they call it a gift, where it says integrity, service, and excellence. So now, integrity being the first and most key op word. By him dressing in that uniform and taking on a role of flight, he's already disingenuous and he's already disintegritous. So almost like if you have a human in the way that their body machina works, standing in front of a firing line, or one person, let's just say one person, with an AK-47 or the AR-15, I think is what the new popular name is for this gun with bullets. The first bullet, if it doesn't nick a vital organ or an artery or vein, only hits like the capillaries or venules, risk of death is low and survival rate's mostly high. And so that's the first bullet. But in technicality, it has pierced through the body's natural defense and it's lowered its integritas level. It's formed some form of whatever. If the same person stands there and calls out to the shooter with a full clip or full magazine of these AR-15 bullets, whatever they might be called, and says, just empty the clip into my body, so this way you have multiple rounds and multiple holes, the integrity is really compromised on that person. They might fall because they might be bleeding so profusely and exsanguinate. So I'm listening to this man who seems like a nice guy on the interview, and he's like, we need more diversity in combat inside the U.S., inside the Air Force. I'm like, that's like asking the man in front of you who already put a hole into your integrity and body to empty the magazine or clip of more AR-15 bullets into your body and help you exsanguinate out. I mean, it's like fee financial suicide. I'm a little confused why they would allow such a thing. Because he sits there in this interview and he's like, we have to have more diversity in combat. And I'm like, the U.S. needs more diversity. If you hire more diverse population into this U.S., being he's the diverse candidate since he's the first black man, and there were men before, so we'll call them white, that's just asking for inflation in an inflat way of then how do you know who fights? You're not all fighting for the same cause. At some point, someone's going to fight for power. And now you're just causing a dangerous situation. So why would you stand in front of everybody and call out for someone to actively shoot you full of bullets and ruin the integrity of your ability to stand up, stand tall, fight, and defend? I'm just curious, because when I watch these interviews with this first black this, first black that, I'm like, okay, so that's the first bullet. All right, there's the second. We have an active shooter inside the U.S., theoretically, or hybrid theory. But yet I don't see anybody taking these dangers or threats seriously or out of the system. Now, interestingly enough, Lewis and I were in the car. I've been in the house. I've only been able to get where my feet can carry me. So he was going to Home Depot. I used to spend a lot of time in Home Depot with design and products and whatever for the business that I was working in that wound up, whatever. So I asked him to go. He had to have some keys made. So we're going, and his friend Ron calls, which I've never really spoken to. And Ron says something. First of all, it was like dirty old man in my ear. I was just like, listen, my dad, like, oh my God, I don't want to know. Like, this is not okay to speak. And then it went to, he said something about Cinderella. I think my father brought up Cinderella. And Ron brings in this, like, studious or scholarly version of Cinderella. I mean, like, I've seen the movie. I don't really remember it. Not something I've studied, not something I really watched, but I've watched it before, and theoretically, like, the whole, like, maid to Prince Charming Mrs. the Pumpkin, like, the synopsis, like, real surface level. And he's like, well, no, she chopped off, like, at the time, he's like, they were saying that they chopped off their toes just to try to get, because there were so few men. And I'm like, yeah, well, 1978, that became a true thing. And then I'm like, it dawns on me later on, that whole toe thing, theories of everything. I'm like, now why are they chopping off toes, theories of everything that they already know to be certain, just to do some dangerous whatever? Then I'm going to go into the earlier part of the program where they have these 3 refugees that they've followed, 3 different parts of the world. One being the place where this UN, U.N, U.S, whatever, is sitting dangerously in New York quietly, and pushing for some kind of, I don't know. I mean, again, it's like having an active shooter, but now the shooter situation's swapped. It's like now they're shooting the protection agency from inside with these quiet paper pushing positions where there's not this very vibrant, visceral look of holes in a body, so you could say, no, that's not acceptable. That's a definite danger and threat to society. But now it's on paper, and it's quietly doing this task because it's been planted inside some office that not everybody has access to, not everybody knows about, but it's calling over for change and for problems in some other scenario. So they're going to show these 3 kids. Now, I also noticed that something is funding these 3 refugees. They're not migrants. It's not like the Great Migration. That's like a different song and dance from whatever. But this is this new refugee crisis, and not the Ukraines. This is like other places. And they're getting here, and the woman's like, by accident. And I'm like, Now, I know what I've been withheld from. I know who's withheld my ability to get to where I need to be. I've seen them. They are taking opportunity away. They just are. They took mine. They, like, put me into some quiet, like, struggle while other things were going on. And it's a dangerous situation. It just is. It might not be as visceral and visual as an active shooter situation, but it's still going on. And it's changing the landscape. And it's also like there's planned union level jobs going on that they're being given. And it's essentially like wiping out the ability to survive for others. So this is what this looks like, according to the humans that have jobs and opportunity and are able to create this, that have some kind of currency and some form of pay that goes on.
We got one order in for a all-leather mushroom suit.
Yep.
Yeah. Mushrooms.
Still thinking about the general. He left this for us a coin.
He did.
I like it when people bring gifts. Integrity, service, excellence. He embodies all of that. All of that. That'll do it for us. We'll see you tomorrow right here on CBS.
All right, so he says as part of the Juneteenth coverage. Now, just prior to this, there was some star formation in New Zealand. It looks like a spiral gas, whatever. For me, it looks like the beginnings of the show Twilight Zone, but whatever in that. I'll go back to that afterwards, but here's the thing. It says diversifying the skies. It says U.S. Air Force, and then some superintendent on diversity, the arm, and then forces. One of the most scary hypotheticals that are actually in action. Like, my entire life has been wasted, and I've gotten to know where I wanted to be, while this guy's climbing ladders and getting into first spot positions and a superintendent position in some U.S. that actively told me that I'd have to figure out a way in because the brown person somewhere in this shade wasn't letting me in through high school. And I'm like, well, what else am I supposed to do? How else am I supposed to have a voice?
A history-making pilot with us. That's right. Lieutenant General Richard Clark has been superintendent of the U.S. Air Force Academy for nearly 2 years. He is the first black general appointed to that prestigious post.
First general in the U.S. Air Force Academy. There's also this big push all of a sudden. They're starting to talk about this word Tuskegee. I had never heard that ever. Not from Lewis, not from Linda, not from anything on the TV. It doesn't exist here. Except it exists somewhere else that's quiet and actively growing in some string theory and some global operation that nobody has discussed with management in New York, at least. And it hasn't gotten to my whatever, my stereosphere inside the heliosphere and the ace.
General Clark is also a highly decorated command pilot with more than 400 hours of combat experience. A few years ago, he commanded the 8th Air Force, where the Tuskegee Airmen served during World War II. General, how you doing? Good morning.
I'm great, man. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
As we noted, you are the first black superintendent of the Air Force Academy. What has it been like? Because you've been at this position for about 2 years, right?
That's correct. Yeah, it's been interesting. It's been great, though. I love being back at my alma mater. But COVID was tough. We fought through that. Imagine being at a service academy during a global pandemic, but it's really an honor to be there. So,
and your Air Force Chief of Staff and the Vice Superintendent are also black.
That's true.
What is it like for you in the...
So now it's not just one bullet. Now you've got an active shooter with 3 bullets, and your body's just as exsanguinating and getting, like, less integritous every day that this goes on. Why does it keep happening?
in the cadets to see that representation in positions of power and influence?
Well, I think it's a representation.
Those are key words. Power and influence. That they keep trying to power up this machine inside. When I checked, the coins are still silver or nickel or whatever. They're silver color in this area, in this territory, that has a U.S. somehow affiliation, so they claim. I don't even know how they got that accomplished. But we're in a North American continent. And at the same time that we're in this North American continent that has a very specific shape, S-H-A-P-E, there are people that look like this, claiming to be African here in North America, and they're propagating and celebrating the African continent while inside the North American continent, and they're calling themselves American. I also saw that Russia captured 2 soldiers in Ukraine. One that looks North American, and the other, I have no idea what country he comes from, but it's not America. But he's claiming to be American, so that's confusing. Also, this idea of America is almost like saying I come from Eurasia. It's like this great expansive territory, and it's like, no, I'm going to need something a little more specific than that. Where? Same thing when they say America. Because America, top to bottom, is almost as wide a landmass as Europe to Asia is in a different cross. For cross-reference.
And really the diversity in our armed forces, our Air Force, and we constantly work on that. We think it's important. It's a strategic imperative for us, because if we're going to have an armed forces, we can't just build that armed forces from 30% of our population.
Right.
Yeah, we can. Who says we can't? What's the 30%? The 30%, is that the original 30% before all of this diversity started like breaking out and getting weapons and getting boats and then getting access to planes? Just curious, because like the beginnings of an active shooter situation and a takeover on like global systemic is really frightening the more I see Americans speak.
Right. We need to be represented by the entire population. If we're going to defend America, we need to look like America.
Is that a matter?
Well, then why is America starting to look like a refugee crisis? If that's where they're going with it. Why would I want to start building a defense department after the refugees have already gotten here, who were looking and denied elsewhere access to armed forces or whatever? Now they're coming here, and now they want to start up this like, oh, we're all just so great in one? No. I've seen what's happened in New York City. I mean, one of this color gets in, and then all of a sudden the entire police department, like the main head positions, all changed in like matter of like months, days. It's just new administration comes in, boom, done. Hello, I'm still in the city. Now how am I going to be able, like, who's defending me? Like, how do I get anywhere? How do my children survive this?
of principle and philosophy, or a matter of actual effectiveness in combat?
It's a strategic imperative. If we're going to be effective, we need the power of our population.
Exactly. I don't want him to be effective. I don't want him to grow. I mean, again, first sign of cancer, the first tumor you find, you're supposed to go into the surgeon and have it removed immediately. You don't hang on to the tumorous growth and go, oh, let's wait for more. Let's, again, break down our integrity and let's hope we survive.
And diversity is inherently American strength. And in the military, we're taught to capitalize on our strengths. So that's one that we have, and we work hard to capitalize on it.
I look forward to the day.
I'm sure they work hard on capitalizing it. I've noticed between taking money from all sorts of different, like what seemed like legitimate businesses, but then based on what their reinvestment back into the system was, has now taken like a very fraudulent turn for the worse in causing this effect. And actually taking legitimate businesses, and then it's like they curb the funding and they put it in a certain whatever, and now they're growing problems and growing fraudulent and growing future problems. But from a legitimate first, like stems from a legitimate business, but then it's being funneled into growing these dangerous groups in a really strategic and strong fashion that I'm 20 years looking for active employment and somewhere to have a career and somewhere to fit in and to meet people and like, or not even meet people, but like to meet my one, and I'm unsuccessful. So now why is it I'm so unsuccessful, and who's backing them in such voracious veracity that their capacity and strength has grown in this really frightening amount?
Where we don't have to have the first black anything. I look forward to that day. We're certainly not there yet. That's why we wanted to celebrate you on this.
Again, the messenger, that's her message. My message, very different. But my message is not being shown in the field. It's only a one-sided argument or conversation coming from the problem.
Juneteenth. Did you?
And coming from the problem that's growing and becoming more dangerous the more the integrity of the system starts pulling adrift from where we were into something that is dangerous. And it's quietly, passive-aggressively dangerous. It's not in that visceral, visual, I mean, unless you are rooted and grounded in an argument. I mean, like, I hear Lynn and Lou, they don't even see it. I'm like, are we living in the same visual spectrum? Like, how do you not see? I mean, you're going to die within the next 20 to 30 years. I'm still going to be here, as are my 4 children that I can name. And we're inheriting this dangerous future from your persons who don't even see this as a problem.
Did you feel, or do you feel stress or pressure on yourself because you are a first in that position?
I think at times, the pressure for me, though, is to perform. I mean, I have a job to do, and I need to do it well. But there's so many people that have made this opportunity possible for me. I don't want to let them down. People like...
Again, standing on the shoulders of others that wanted to see this kind of situation happen. So who are those people who keep promoting and propagating and fighting for this to happen? Why don't they get taken care of? I'm just curious, in a way that removes them from access to money, power, and so on and so forth. Why do they continuously let this connection happen? And why have I been so disconnected from where and what keeps me safe?
Like the Tuskegee Airmen, like you mentioned, Nate. I remember this one event I was at. It was a Tuskegee Airmen convention. And I had showed up, and our chief of staff, Mark Welsh, at the time, General Mark Welsh, he met me there. He told me that I was going to be promoted to 3-star, but to keep it quiet. And I spent that
No idea what that means. 1-star, 2-star, 3-star. Nobody speaks of that around here.
cocktail hour time just talking to these original Tuskegee Airmen. Didn't tell them I was going to be promoted,
Right.
but I was just on cloud 9. But then when General Welsh, he was the keynote speaker. It was when I was the commander of 8th Air Force, which is all of our bomber forces.
Yeah.
He gave this great speech about the Tuskegee Airmen.
Now, he knows more about the U.S. Armed Forces than I've ever been able to understand. I was not born knowing. Lou and Lynn don't know. They don't speak about bomber air forces. Wouldn't even know how to, learn it in this nothingness. Wouldn't know where to access the information to put a chart together to teach myself of what to be aware of, what to look out for, and how to be an active participant in whatever they call this. But yet, the active shooter situation that's breaking the integrity of the system down and could potentially cause, this small breakdown now, if the bullet hole just keeps bleeding out and doesn't get stopped or somebody doesn't apply pressure, it will exsanguinate out in my situation. So that means that I'm dead in the future. So now why would this be allowed to continue doing this in a string theorem kind of a way over long generational and heritage? It's a mounting concern.
Airmen, and then he goes, "Where's Rich Clark? Are you sitting in the audience? Where are you, Rich?" And he asked me to come up, and I had no idea what he was going to do. And he brought me up, and he looked out to these original Tuskegee Airmen. He goes, "Would you have ever imagined when you were flying missions in World War II that one day the commander of the bombers that you're escorting would be a black man?"
Yeah.
And those Tuskegee Airmen, it was so humbling. They started to stand up and clap.
And clap, yeah.
And I realized it wasn't about me.
Yeah.
It was about one person who was a part of their legacy. And it put honestly, some pressure on me to pay it forward.
But we're clap.
But that legacy, as passive as it looks, just in its everyday whatever, in the future, for whatever's inherited and whatever children are here, now becomes an even bigger issue. When there's boots and seeds in the field and on the ground, it now becomes an even bigger daunting task and a bigger threat for the others that are relying on someone to take care of this in some kind of, I don't know, one hand washes the other. I don't really know what words to use.
Clapping for you today, and clearly you take the job very seriously. I was reading that when you first got it, when COVID hit, you spent 28 days, General Sir, in the dorms with the cadets.
I did.
Sleeping on the cots.
Yeah.
You spent 28 days. Why did you do that?
They were going through some tough times, and I wanted them to know that their whole staff, all of our faculty, our instructors, our coaches, that we're all with them, and I felt like I was probably the best representative of our staff, and that we're in this together.
You have 4 priorities for them?
I
for
do.
Your cadets?
Well, first, to develop leaders of character, and we
There you
talk
go.
about that all the time. That is most important in any realm of life. Was to defeat COVID-19. I think we're in a good place there.
Yeah.
I hope we are.
I hope so.
The next one's to prepare them for future conflict. Not for next year, not for 2 years from now, but for 5 or 15 years.
So they are actively planning for well into the future, which on a statistical analysis and somebody can do it with string and post-it notes and a couple of like messages. I mean, I've done it. But on a computer within the binary realm now, living on the edge according to Microsoft, it's even, I don't write software programs or whatever, but it is so much more possible to see the possibilities and the exponentials in, like, statistical analysis. And projections.
That they're ready for whatever our country might face. And then lastly, to really cultivate a culture of dignity and respect, which is crucial in our armed forces.
Now, Air Force Academy also trains cadets for Space Force.
We do.
Now, given your hours of experience and your knowledge in Space Force, I have to ask, I feel like a lot of people at home are wondering, what's all this talk about UFOs? Are they real?
Yes.
Does alien life form exist? I can't
You didn't
leave
see that question.
I can't let you leave the set without asking you that question. A lot of Americans want to know.
If I told you, I'd have.
Oh, man. Well, listen, I might have to sacrifice myself for the people. They want to know.
That's a movie reference.
I wish I knew. I'll be honest. You went outside my space there.
Did you go see Top Gun? Did you like?
Oh, I did.
Did you like it? Was
I
it
thought it was a
believable
great
to you?
movie.
How realistic is it?
Well, I thought it was realistic enough for me to enjoy that movie. I thought it was a great movie.
Hey, that's
I
great.
really
Yeah, because
did.
we loved it.
Talk about great. It's June 20th today. I've heard from reliable sources this is a really good day for you.
Oh, it's a big day. I got to give a shout out. It's my anniversary. My wife Amy and I have been married
Yay,
24
Amy.
years.
That's awesome.
So any chance I get to make some points with her,
No doubt.
I'm taking it.
Yeah, that's good.
Happy anniversary.
Congratulations to you and Amy. Do you have a brother? Just
I
asking
do.
for a friend.
I do. He's taken though. I have a son though, but he's only 20. But
No, thank you. No, thank you.
What?
No.
Come on, Stella, you want to get your groove back?
No. Absolutely not. Amy, I would never. Congratulations.
Thank
We're
you
very
so
happy
much.
for you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me
Big
here.
congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, General Clark, thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Coming up.
All right, now here's the like Twilight Zone looking star from or phenomenon that happened in New Zealand that they're mentioning this morning.
Table. Imagine you're in New Zealand.
Uh-huh.
It's Sunday night. Darkness falls, and you walk outside and you look at the night sky and you see this. It
What is
looks
that?
like a blue galaxy floating across the sky.
Looks like a painting.
Yeah, it looks like a painting. So people snap some pictures. Turns out the going theory here is, of course, immediately people were like, aliens at it again. The going theory is that it is exhaust from a SpaceX rocket catching sunlight in outer space, illuminated in that spiral, looking like a galaxy. Isn't that cool?
Yeah,
That is
very.
very cool.
Very cool.
Initially, I thought it was a painting, that's for sure.
Or maybe aliens at it again. Could be.
You know what? Tony, I have somebody that might be able to answer that question. I'm glad you asked that question. All right, as part of our Juneteenth coverage.
Now there's a commercial this morning I've never seen. I've never seen a commercial for Brazil, Brazil, to go visit. But this morning, the commercial's on there for the first time, which is odd, because it's not... most of the time, they're pretty steady with how they fill in the commercial space on this program or the other programs that I've been, I guess, monitoring. But today, for the first time, they put a travel to Brazil commercial.
The United Nations is celebrating World Refugee Day today, commemorating the strength, courage, and perseverance of refugees. And if you needed a reminder, well, the war in Ukraine is showing us once again the horror that people face when they are forced out of their homes by conflict or persecution.
Now this is different because now they're mucking up the stalls and they're creating stalls, whereas the Great Migration from Europe at one time was totally acceptable. they're now causing a refugee crisis at the end of a complete breakdown in integrity on the inside of the U.S. I mean, they even show not only are these refugees, not the Ukrainians, but the three, one from 3 territories, whatever, they're living better than I am. They are dressed better than I am. And they're like, I mean, again, it's like, and one has some kind of council position in Congress. I'm like, now how does he get into some level of communication with government, and I've never even been taught how to get to that level? And I grew up here. Talk about withholding much needed information from the population, the great migrant children who needed access to certain levels of care and information and conversation and to be an active part of the solution in this great country and great nation, especially during a time where they already knew that there were people here trying to tear and anarch their way to some kind of new whatever. But it's causing indentured servitude. This freedom of slavery is causing indentured servitude. And it's like unspoken of, and like, I don't know. I mean, it's really a terrible place to stand or to be while all of this is somehow like getting ahead.
Since 1975, the United States has welcomed more than 3 million refugees from all.
Oh, and there's that hyperbole number, haiku number. The, like, what is it, 575 or 757? I don't know. But 75 is a really dangerous path for me at this point.
All over the world, and we asked 3 of them to share their stories.
Not one of them are European or traditional European from the time of the Great Migration, might I add.
My name is Jessie Calzado Esbona.
My name is Kumari Regmi.
My name is George Stark.
And this is the story
Of how I became
A refugee.
Some of the worst fighting in the endless civil war broke out near the...
Now, in here, inside the borders of North America, I'd never even heard that they had a civil war. I never even heard of these people. I've never learned where in the world they come from. I'm totally unprepared and unsuspecting, but yet someone in the system is allowing them to move into the territory with, look, AR-15 style guns, street warfare. I mean, like, a totally different life than my, like, chitty chitty bang bang life and the, like, Care Bear psychology that I come from. In, like, that's how the peacemakers were raised. But yet you've got active warfare people acting within this theater at the same time. And I haven't even been warned that they arrived.
the American Embassy.
I came to the United States in 1999 due to a 14-year civil war in Liberia, my birth country. I was about 6 years old when we fled Liberia. I lost a few family members, mainly my grandfather and my father. I personally almost got killed during the Civil War. I was standing on top of a hill and a bullet just came and, passed right by my ear.
Now that's what Civil War looks like. So I'm a little confused when they speak Civil War here. Because that's not what it's looked like in New York, especially in New York City, necessarily.
Ear.
I was 6 years old when my family were forcibly evicted from Bhutan.
The country's former ruler, King Jigme Sigme Wangchuk, imposed tough new citizenship laws on ethnic Nepalis.
All People has to practice Buddhism and then speak their language and then wear their clothing. I have many families that have been tortured. People were taken from the community and were beaten at night, so we could hear them crying at night. So my parents and my grandparents were talking, saying that, I think someone will come and will be killed, so we need to leave home right now.
Another territory nobody spoke of, nobody prepared for, and even after it made landfall by I don't know what process, nobody informed the residents of anything it came from in this signs to look out for if they start businesses, what's their symbols, that kind of thing.
In a blink of an eye and no fault of my own, I became a refugee. I came to the US when I was 7 years old, and this happened in 1995 when we had the huge migration of rafter crisis from Cuba coming to America.
Oh, from Cuba, right. Okay, so this brotherhood of man between Cuba and Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico's not even a state. I mean, we have Hawaii, who somehow has statehood, and then there's Alaska, who has statehood, in the not connected directly to the continental territory known as the United States of America. Puerto Rico is not part of it. Puerto Rico, I don't know what they're a part of. I don't even know. Sometimes they say they're a state, sometimes they don't, but they got this Cuba relationship and brotherhood in an XIX kind of a way, according to Google, and according to their pattern flag, that's the direct inverse of one another.
13 Cuban boat people picked up in the Caribbean last week.
People who really prefer to just risk your life and going across the sea than to spend one more day in economically collapsed Cuba. Chaos erupted. They grabbed me, put me in this raft, and I actually became an accidental refugee by being placed in this raft.
But now when they become these refugees, are there social workers who are setting them up inside, with deep roots now of communities and funding and clothing, housing? I mean, I was birthed here. I was part of the great allowable migration through Ellis Island. Not this, we have no idea how they arrived. They arrived on some boat. But yet they're getting taken care of, and the people who are living here have not had the same level of care. How does anyone function or call themselves professional when someone's allowing this? And who would allow this?
16 people and a dog. I could never really fully describe the intensity of the sea. But then years later, I saw a movie, Castaway, and there was a scene where it's the water and it's the ocean and it was thundering. It brought me back to that moment. It was exactly what I experienced.
Yeah, I have a different take on UFOs and unexplained phenomenon in some dream state and then wake up in a bed elsewhere. I mean, in one instance, I call it dancing on the ceiling because, again, that just made sense in in a physiological state that moves. But then there's this other thing with some parallel shift.
Yeah, way to Ghana, where we end up living in Bujumbura refugee camp.
Well, I spent that 17 years in the refugee camp.
After we were rescued, we were transferred to Guantanamo Bay.
There was many days where, we went to bed hungry.
We used to eat rice in the morning and rice at night. There was no snacks or no fruits or anything. I've seen so many little kids dying because of malnutrition.
Now again, they say America, but top to bottom, that's a really long, are they talking Central America, South America? Are they talking North America? Because I see a whole lot of people that look like this in the local references of visualization. and it's getting really hard to try to keep oneself safe and straight and find a place to fit in, because this is like busy work now. This is like busy work. People are getting funding, they're doing foundations, they're doing all this stuff that I'm like, I've been here 4 decades. Where do I fit in? Like, I'm Great Migration from generations ago, still here, still surviving, but I need help as well, and there's nothing, prepared for me? Nothing's even thought that I might need help or that I even exist. I mean, like, this gets really strange to have to even hand raise and ask for help with all this distraction work.
I lived in Miami for a little bit, and then in Tampa, Florida.
The first day when I came to America was the day that Barack Obama was inaugurated.
So help me God.
Oh, so now her first experience is she thinks he belongs in the White House. So she broke into America's system and laws. Same time, the president all of a sudden no longer represents the integrity of the White House. So this gets like really hard to explain because now his history's been miswritten. How do you correct that? And why wasn't it corrected or stopped before it went into action? If you're a director and executor at like the movie set and the world stage.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
I saw, on the news everywhere, like Obama. I never forget that day.
It took a while to adjust to